The US seems clear it expects European countries to take over the work of defending themselves after attending the Munich Security Summit over the weekend, hearing calls for greater European unity in the face of the threat from Russia. MPs from within the Prime Minister's own party are calling on him to increase defence spending. Laura Kyrke-Smith, the MP for Aylesbury, is one of them and joins us on the line now. Good morning.
Good morning.
I mean, it's quite I've read your sort of take on this. Just explain to people, you're saying that there needs to be more spending on defence and actually it needs to come much more quickly.
That's right. So I'm just back from the Munich Security Conference. I was there with a colleague, Melanie Ward, and we've written a piece today to make clear the scale and the urgency of the threat that we saw in Munich. It's an annual conference. It's been happening every year for the last 60 years. It goes under the motto peace through dialogue. But this year's conference felt particularly consequential. And I think there were two reasons why that was the case. The first was J.D. Vance, the US Vice President, standing up before us all and making it really clear that one of the fundamental pillars of Europe's security over the last few decades is at risk of crumbling. We have always been able to count on the protection and the solidarity of the United States, and it's no longer clear that that's the case. And I think the second point related to Ukraine, and so this sense of threat is particularly pressing. I know you've been talking on your programme about the so-called peace negotiations getting underway between President Trump and President Putin. Of course, President Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, was very clear at the Munich Security Conference that there can be no peace in Ukraine without Ukraine being there at the table. And I suppose by extension, there can be no peace in Europe without Europe there. And that for me is why I've come back, and with my colleague, we're calling for a really urgent look at our own defence capabilities, our own defence spending. The threat is very real and urgent, and we're strong, and we have to stand up and respond to that.
And what do you think the figure should be? Because at the moment we are spending £56.9 billion. We're going to be spending 59.8 in 2025-26. That's about 2.3%. The government has committed to 2.5%, although not said when, likely by the end of this parliament. What kind of figure would you like to see the government spending?
So the Prime Minister has committed to getting us to setting out that pathway to 2.5% of GDP spent on defence. I believe that really can't come soon enough, having spoken to delegates from other European countries across Europe when I was in Munich. I think we're going to need to move very quickly towards that spending figure. I look forward to seeing the pathway that the Prime Minister will set out. And beyond that, we may need to be more ambitious. I think it's really interesting when you hear from other European countries how they are thinking about this. And across Europe, there's a real commitment to increasing spending. We're seeing others move very quickly. Sweden, for example, has committed to 2.4% already this year. The Germans are looking at it very, very carefully. In Poland, interestingly, and obviously they feel that threat from Russia much more closely than we do. But in Poland, they're already at 4.7% spending of GDP on defence.
So what, just to be clear with our listeners, what are you suggesting that the UK should be spending in terms of percentage of GDP?
It's for the Prime Minister to decide, but what I'm very clear about is that it needs to be ambitious, and that the pathway to achieving that spending figure needs to be set out as quickly as possible.
And do you think Sorry, I was just going to say, given that you are a Labour MP and we know that the spending review is coming up, we also know there are cuts coming in that spending review, whatever happens next. Do you think Labour MPs are willing to make those very difficult choices that could see, the benefits budget cut, spending cut in certain areas of local government, for example, which would have an impact on social care? Is Labour ready for that?
I think Labour MPs are increasingly aware of that threat. I want to see us invest in our public services. I want to see us focused on growth, as we rightly are. We're only going to be able to invest in those public services here if we can achieve growth. But what I've become very clear on, I think, is that we're only going to achieve our plan for change. We're only going to achieve this radical transformation that we need to see in our health service and in our education if it has that secure underpinning of national security. And so we do need to be very aware of the severity of the security threats out there, and ensure that foundational security isn't being overlooked.
Laura Kyrke-Smith, the MP for Aylesbury, thank you for joining us this morning.